Welcome to the Hey Hot Mama podcast. I'm Jen Peralt, founder of Hot Off the Rack and Hot Mama Collective.
And I'm Liz Guidotti, Jen's mom, also known as the OG Hot Mama.
We're a mother-daughter duo having real conversations about motherhood, health, life, and finding more joy in the everyday moments.
And Jenny is known for her positive outlook and daily gratitude practice. And together, we're here to share stories, perspective shifts, and plenty of laughs along the way.
Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to feel like the hot mamas we truly are. Welcome to the Hey Hot Mama podcast. I'm Jen Peralt of Hot Off the Rack and Hot Mama Collective, and we are so grateful to have Flo Ridley and Megan Michelson from the Birds and Bees here with us today. And I'm personally so excited to have them because I've been following them since my first kid was born. And actually, I had something happen recently, very innocent situation, but because I was following you guys for so long, we felt prepared for it. My friend told me about you years ago. And before then, I would always want to default to letting my husband explain things to them because they're boys. I'm a girl, right? And I'm like, I don't know about this stuff. Like, ask your dad. But I'm like, no, you can do it. Say the words, tell them what you need to tell them. And it was because of you guys that I was able to do that. And I'm so glad that this was just a minor, very innocent situation that happened with my kid and that he was able to explain that to me. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And that's why I'm so excited to have you, as well as bringing Mary Flo to Covington to give a presentation on May 6th. And before we talk more about that, why don't you guys tell me what inspired you to start the Birds and the Bees and to talk to parents about these topics?
Well, I started Birds and Bees in 1986. And I did it really because my child asked a question, Mommy, how's that baby getting out of there? And even though I knew the answer to that question for the first time in her childhood, I didn't feel like I could answer her question because I grew up in a house where none of these things were discussed or explained. Lovely childhood, happy parents, everything was great, but a blank page on this topic. And so it left me wondering, how in the world am I ever going to explain this? But I thought I had like a decade to think about it because she was only 4 years old. So a 4-year-old asking a question, I thought, I'm just going to say the doctor helps me. And that was it. That was my whole answer. But then along came a challenge for me as a volunteer with the Dallas Junior League to present something to parents about how to talk to your kids about sex. And that's a whole story in and of itself, because I definitely did not want that assignment. But the assignment include travel. And I do love to travel. And so they were going to send me to Washington, D.C. to get trained. I went. I didn't agree with the underpinnings of the training, with the assumptions that they were going under. And so I came back. I knew that the league was asking me to do a workshop. And so I said, I'm not going to do what I was taught, but give me 6 months and let me think how I would do it. So that was a challenge to me. And yet over the next 6 months, I came up with the curriculum that we still use today. It was just a gift from God. That's all I really can say. It was just a gift. And so it was just breaking down, basically it was breaking down the idea of the talk and the information they get in the talk when we think of the talk in quotes, and eradicate that idea and instead replace it with lots of little conversations that you have with your children as you walk along the way, as they're growing up, as they come home and tell you about something that happened with their friend, to open it up to children when they're young, impressionable, curious, and they're listening to their mommies and their daddies. So it was just, it was a shock to me that it was as effective as it was, and it kind of caught on as a popular kind of, let's have Mary Flo come talk to our mops group sort of thing. And then it grew. And then many years later, Megan, who was someone I'd always admired as one of my daughter's best friends, came and heard me talk, and I'll let her continue how it is what it is today. So I'm sorry it's a long story, but it just...
No, this is so interesting. I didn't realize that's how it started.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a long story because it started a long time ago.
Right.
So then after college, I came back to Dallas and I was teaching middle school. So I was teaching predominantly sixth grade, but fifth through eighth ish. But anyway, sixth and seventh grade was the main. And I love my students. I didn't have children of my own yet. And I was just in their world, and I loved them, but I was also kind of overwhelmed a little bit about how sexualized their conversations were, their little worlds were. Because in my head, I was like, they seem so young. Anyway, so that was kind of going on in my brain. And then I get this flyer that was passing out to the kids one afternoon to send home to their parents. And it said, parents, learn how to talk to your kids about sex with Mary Flo Ridley. And I had grown up with Mrs. Ridley.
Yeah.
I was just like this lovely mother who made cakes. And she does, and they're delicious. But I did not know that she had this like secret job. And so
Yeah.
I got that flyer. I was like, what? And so because of my curiosity with my situation with my students and with my history with Mary Flo, I thought, I've got to go hear her talk. And so I went that night or that week, whatever, and I sat in the back and signed in all the parents and just sat there and took notes. And I just left blown away. And I left thinking every parent has got to talk to their kids about sex in this way. It could change middle school. It could change marriages. Like we are just not talking about this topic in a healthy way. I mean, everybody has to hear this. So that was the beginning of my interest. But of course, stories always take a long time to unfold. So years go by, I have my own child, I hear her again. And same thing, everyone's got to hear this. I took all my notes on a girls' trip I went on a few weeks later. And I made all my girlfriends like, everyone sit down, get a glass of wine. I've got to read you this stuff. So I was just like on this mission to share this information.
Right.
And then a few years go by, I'm pregnant with my second, and I run into Mary Flo's, one of her daughters, who's a friend of mine. And she's like, yeah, my mom kind of wants to step back a bit, but I don't want to take over. And neither does my sister. And I was like, I might want to. And I just kind of said it off the cuff. And then that led to a conversation with Mary Flo, which led to both of us just feeling like, I think this is right. And so I started training under her right after I had my second child. And I would just go around town and listen to every speaking event she did and just sat in the back and took notes and notes and notes and notes and just listened and listened. And I felt like an apprentice, I was just learning the ropes and learning the questions and answers and all that stuff. And then flash forward probably a year or so after that, we rebranded and became Birds and Bees. And then I started speaking on my own. She would continue to speak. And so we kind of just divide and conquer speaking. And then when COVID hit, it shut down speaking. Obviously,
right.
people get together to go to parent education events. And so that was a pivot in our work. And that is when we really stepped into social media. Reluctantly at first, that was not a place I really wanted to dive in and become this like talking head on this topic. But I also just felt such a calling of like, this is some information that I have that I want to share with others. And so I kind of just got over it and dove right in. And it's been a really fun adventure for us. It's been really fruitful to be on social media. We're able to reach parents all over the world.
Right.
Believe it or not, this is a universal issue.
Yes.
And everyone is struggling about this. How do we talk to our kids about this? What can I say? What should I not say? Everyone comes to the table with their own issues and baggage when it comes to this topic. How do we detangle that from our children and their conversations and their knowledge? So through Instagram, I feel like now with Birds and Bees, we're really able to reach a really large audience, which is exciting. And then during that time window, we recorded our talk that we give in person. So we have an online course that people can access without having to come to one of our programs. But we still speak publicly. We love doing that. That's always a fun way to connect with parents. Mm-hmm. But the online course and Instagram has allowed us to really connect and educate parents in such a wider range we ever thought possible. So now we are Birds and Bees, and we're kind of just
having fun
doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Visiting with you.
Yes, yeah. I love that story so much. And that's really cool that you really started on social media in 2020. That was actually the birth of my first son in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't long after that y'all had blown up so much that my friend heard about you and was like, Jen, you need to go follow them. Like, they're going to tell you how to do it. Because I was telling her, I'm like, I'm a girl. Like, I grew up with girls. Like, I don't know how to talk about boy stuff, Mm-hmm. And not that I would be fantastic about talking about girl stuff, but like, I can relate a little more,
Mm-hmm.
And I just used you guys as such a resource. And like you said, yes, you can reach people online, but a really big reason why I wanted to bring you guys to Covington is because as a community, I want all of us as moms to feel like we're on the same page, like we're in this village together and we all have this information to help each other. And so I really appreciate y'all coming out. I'm really excited to do that. And speaking of having these conversations with your kids, I see all different ways that you recommend to do it, but what age should we bring certain things up, or maybe the biggest things? What do you think about that?
Well,
So
that's,
everyone loves, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I'll let you jump in because I was going to say one quick thing is that everybody wants so desperately to have like a time. I think as parents, particularly proactive parents, if you're listening to this episode, you're obviously um, a parent who wants to try hard to do what's best for their kids. So we all have this like desire to do it right, which is, way to go. That's a good place to start. But what we always say is there's not a perfect age. So we will give you some specific, ages and some ideas, but overall, we have a general philosophy of there's no perfect age. It's probably sooner than you think, but we always say later is better than never. So start soon. But if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, I have a 12-year-old and I've said nothing, we're also big believers in later is better than never. So Mary Flo, when would you say like some of the early conversations can start?
Well, I would say the earliest conversations start almost when they're on the changing table with
Mm-hmm.
identifying their body parts. And it's so nice if you can just get it in your mind from the time you have a baby that this is something you are going to be talking about so that you can drop information in when it's appropriate, instead of just holding off and thinking, I need to wait a long time before I bring this up. Um, the thing is that instead of asking the question, when is the right time, ask the question, who's going to tell them? Because when they go to
Right.
first grade, if you have a firstborn first grader, there's nothing in their world that goes beyond first grade. But they're sitting next to someone in their class who's the youngest of four. You can't tell, they don't put it on their t-shirt, you don't know that. But they live in a 16-year-old house and they hear 16-year-old words and tell 16-year-old jokes and get them. And so your children are actually going to school with the oldest sibling of anyone in that classroom. They are bringing all that information to the classroom. And so it's hard to understand that when your oldest is only in first grade, but when your youngest is in first grade, you kind of get it because they have older sisters and brothers in middle school and they are in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, the earlier the better. Plus, they don't see your awkwardness. If you are talking to a 12-year-old, they see it all over you. But when they're little and you kind of mess up or you get embarrassed or you splotch because you're embarrassed to say those words, they are not paying attention to that. They're just getting information from you. So I think the younger, as Megan said, the younger the better, but it's never too late.
Yeah, I think that's so true about feeling more awkward when they're 12 because they can see it on you versus if you had started those conversations when they were younger, it's not as weird when you say that word in front of them
Exactly.
because they've heard you say it before. And I will say, I still struggle a little bit because I'm such an inappropriate laugher and just in general, or like I have to like look away for a minute and then like go back to what we were talking about. Um, but I definitely agree that starting those conversations early and not even just a conversation, but using certain terminology
Mm-hmm.
with them is helpful.
Yeah.
And that being said, I hate to say that any parent is making a mistake, so let's not call it that. But what are some things that we should avoid doing with young kids when it comes to conversations about this?
So I think one of our overall goals with these conversations, we just talked about how starting early helps you as a parent feel comfortable and helps them see like, oh, this is something my mom talks about, or oh, this is something my dad always brings up. So I think ultimately one of our goals is to not make these topics taboo. And so I think that is something you can really start at such a young age. And so mistakes or things to avoid, I think, is shushing or shaming, kind of shutting down a conversation. We say often like our shock can lead to their shame. So they have a question about a body part or a question about something they saw or a question that somebody they saw on TV or word they heard or anything like that that might be alarming to us because we know the real definition or we know why someone's reacting like that or why we know why that felt good or whatever. Instead of being like, what are you doing? Or why'd you say that? Or where'd you hear that word? I mean, our reactions can really immediately shut down these conversations because our kid, who doesn't really know anything in this realm, is all of a sudden sensing from mom and dad, like, oh, that's bad.
Right.
Or, oh, we can't talk about that. Or I shouldn't ask my mom about that again. Or that must be a bad word because I said it in front of my little sister and she's,
Right.
so I think something to avoid for parents would be the shock, or kind of the shock and the shushing. I think that's ultimately, excuse me, ultimately, I think that just kind of shuts down communication. And that is really what we don't want to do, because our kids are, I think it's important to remember as we're having these conversations with our little kids, because we're all about 10 and under and just setting the stage for so many future conversations. And we have to remember when our kids are that young, they're not hearing the information the same way we are as a post-pubescent, hormonally charged adult. So we're coming into these conversations over here, and our prepubescent child is over here, not connecting the dots. So they are asking something because they're just curious. They have no idea that it has to do with this big
Right.
here. So we have to kind of remember that. And just so many of your tone of voice is so huge, kind of to go back to that question of what to avoid. I think a very serious, emotional, heavy voice kind of paints this picture of like, this is really serious. And we can only talk about this when we are sitting down and I have all these books right here and I have a lot to tell you. It's like that doesn't make it a very approachable topic. And so what we really want to do is have your tone of voice be very matter of fact, and conversational. Again, the goal is for things to not be taboo, and the goal is for you to be a safe place.
That's such a great answer.
I would just add to that by saying, be prepared that you're going to want to have that reaction. Like I remember thinking, I'm going to be petrified when my child says, how did that baby get in there? I just know my facial expression is not going to be right and my tone of voice isn't going to be right. So we actually encourage parents to come up with a pre-designated opening line, a pre-designated facial expression to the questions that you think are probably going to be the hardest. And so one good question that we offer up, or one good response we offer up, is, that is a great question. I'm so glad you asked. Instead of going directly to the answer, just hit the pause button for a second, affirm for them that they've come to the right place, that you're happy they came to you. That's a great question. So you're encouraging them to come back. I'm the right person. You came to the right person. And then smile. Just try to say, oh, that is a great question. I'm so glad you asked me that. And that gives you just a moment to kind of retrack in your brain what you were going to answer that question with. So it's sort of a stalling technique with purpose.
Yeah, that's helpful. And actually, I have a recent time where I could have asked you guys this. So, and I'll ask you right now. So we were walking into Chick-fil-A and Beck starts asking me this question. I kind of don't really remember the question that it was, but either way, I just like didn't want to answer it right there in Chick-fil-A. And so I was like, ooh, like I want to tell you all about that, but not while we're walking into Chick-fil-A. Should I have just like on the cuff answered it? Or do you think it was okay to say like, not while we're walking in here? Really, it was because like there's like all kinds of people around, and I'm like, I don't want to answer this question.
I think that's fine. I mean, something we say a lot at Birds and Bees is we want parents to be purposeful, not perfect. And so we have a concept we talk about a lot, which is called circling back. And that is just to empower parents of, if a question comes and you didn't give your best answer, or you're thinking, oh, it's super loud and distracting right here, I'm not going to be able to focus and say everything I want to say, to give a quick, short answer, that lets them feel heard, and then circle back later and just say, sweetheart, earlier today at Chick-fil-A, you asked me a really good question. And I just didn't get to tell you everything I wanted to because it was so crowded and there was so much going on. So I'm going to answer you now. And so to kind of just empower parents to think, instead of thinking like, I've got to nail this, I do it perfectly, I can't mess up, just to say, we are going to mess up. We're all going to mess up these questions, or miss an opportunity, or say the wrong thing, or kind of panic because we're around a lot of people. So just circle back and just go back. They're in our house all the time. They live with us.
Right.
Circle back and just say, hey, sweetheart, that was a great question. And I'm going to try again.
Okay. I like that.
And since you said, can we talk about it later? I would just do it as soon as you can.
Got it.
Because otherwise he picks up, oh, I'm not going to get that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good thinking. So what is something that today's parents need to approach differently that you may have been teaching over the years, or has nothing really changed? Have you kind of kept everything consistent with your presentations, or is there something about today's generation that you've had to shift?
The thing that's changed in our presentation is the conversation about pornography.
Mm,
The biology is the same. So, how we explain how a baby's born, how a baby's made, the terminology that we use, that none of that has changed. And so um, that doesn't need to be changed. But screens have changed a lot of things. So, screen safety and pornography, instead of it being a part of the preteen conversation, we've brought it all the way down to the 5 year
yeah,
olds. Because not that we're going to talk about porn
right.
with a 5 year old, but we're going to begin the conversation. And that's really what I want parents to hear. You're not going to talk about sex with a 5 year old. You're not going to about porn with a 5 year old. You're going to start talking about the design of reproduction with a 5 year old, and you're going to talk about screen safety. We have to be careful around screens. So the goal of those early conversations is so that eventually you can talk about sex and you can talk about porn, and but they will have grown up knowing they needed to be careful around screens and that this is the design of reproduction. So that's that's the difference. People
Mhm.
think they don't need to talk about it until it's an emergency, and actually the sooner you can kind of introduce some of the concepts, the easier it is.
Definitely. So, with that being said, what's one topic that parents should talk to their kids about sooner than they realize? Would you say it's this?
I would. I think so often the topic of pornography is so heavy and
Yeah.
dark that I
Yeah.
think parents really don't want to think about it because it's just so like, it's just dark. It's very heavy, and to think like, oh, not my kids or not us, we're good people, or whatever. But the statistics show otherwise. The average age of child first sees porn is 11. Some studies say 8. And we know these things to be true just because we're raising our kids in this crazy technology world and also this sex saturated culture where it's just everywhere. And you might have like a screen free home, but it could take one kid's friend saying, hey, look at this.
Right.
So we have all these things that we can do to kind of lock down devices and external filters, but we believe that these conversations we can have to prepare our kids create internal filters, and those internal filters can go with them wherever they go. So the phrase Mary Flo mentioned earlier, I think is a really great place to start. And so when you say talking to your kids about pornography or protecting your kids from pornography, I would think the average parent is probably thinking, okay, that's a good thing to do like around 12, maybe 10, but that's, I think, way too late. So I would say way back when, like around 3 or 4, whenever they're, you're handing them the iPad to watch a movie while you take a shower or whatever it is, or even turning the TV on, say, oh, mommy types in the password because we got to be really careful with what we see. We got to be really careful around screens. And so what we're doing is just setting our child up for this idea that there are some good things we can see, but there are also some bad things. We have to be really careful with what we see. And so again, breaking this down into the same way that we talk about any other dangers in their life, like a hot thing on the stove. We don't have a one sit down
Mhm.
conversation about third-degree burns and tell them
Right.
one time, be really careful in that kitchen.
Yeah.
It's no, we say it
Right.
casually. We say it when they walk in the kitchen. Oh, remember, be careful. Mommy's got that stove on, so don't touch that. Be really careful. Same thing when we're crossing the street. That's not something we teach them once. We break it down to age appropriate phrases and we repeat them often. Look both ways. Hold mommy's hand. We talk to our friends about it. Hey, can you hold his hand to help him cross the street? I'm going to get the baby out of the car. Like we're just talking about it and putting safeguards up. And so our kids know I need to be careful around the street. And so I think when does that start? I think that can start as young as 3 or 4. Hey, you got to be
Yeah.
really careful around screens. And so those are little conversations that build. And of course, we want, there's this whole concept of good pictures and bad pictures. And there's a great book with that title that we recommend families to have. But ultimately, these conversations, they build as your kids get older. So obviously, we don't think you should be talking to your 15-year-old about bad pictures. By then, it's appropriate to have a conversation about pornography. And that conversation is much more robust than be careful around screens.
Yeah.
But when does that start? I think as young as 3 or 4, 4 or 5, to kind of put that idea in their head of we got to be really careful with what we see.
Yeah. I think I definitely agree with that because We have a lot of younger slash older kids in our lives that are always
Mhm.
around my kids, and they're so great and helpful, and they always want to let the kids like hold their phones to play a game. But lately I've been telling our moms like, hey, like whenever we're not around, like, hey, don't let the older kids give our kids the phones because these are teenagers. They don't remember to exit every browser out, like it takes a swipe for them to, see something. And but I like that you're saying be careful, be mindful around screens. Like I wasn't using that phrase.
Mhm.
I usually try and monitor everything that I can, and I'm like, oh, you can't watch that because XYZ.
Mhm.
But I've never really used that term like in the same way that you say, like, oh, we're careful in the parking lot, like you stay by mom. I like that answer a lot. And
And I think it's a muscle that you're building in your kid is kind of this muscle of discernment. So one time one of my kids, who's now 10, said something maybe a year ago, Mom, I saw a bad picture, and of course in my head or my heart, I'm like, oh God, what was it? And it ended up, I think, being like a commercial for like the movie Twisters or something. It was just
yeah,
scary. He saw
yeah,
something scary.
yeah,
So he was probably 9 at the time. But I was like, I'm so glad you told me, whatever. So it was very positive for the way he shared that information with me, because what I really wanted to do was affirm that muscle of discernment. If I saw something that I didn't like, and I'm going to look away, or I saw something that
yeah,
made me feel scared or uncomfortable, and so I'm going to look away and tell an adult. And
yeah,
that is kind of the muscle we're building with all of this, and
right.
that's what I was saying. We as adults have to do the same thing. Like, oh, I know myself, I'm really sensitive to what I see. So I got to be careful with what shows or movies I watch, or, I mean, not to act like you can't watch or see anything, but like just to know how your brain is wired, and how that's a muscle of discernment that I think we can start building with kids is when they're young. And that just grows stronger as they get older through these conversations.
We all parent differently, right?
Of course.
But this, I feel like, is a really good standard and is a way that I like to keep things really positive, and I like that this is a positive message that y'all are sending. And speaking of positive messages, what's some of the best feedback that you've gotten from parents?
I think two things. One, I want to harp on that positivity because I think I'm a positive person too. And so I never want people to come to our talks or our Instagram and feel like it's fear based, because we do deal with some heavy topics and there is
Right,
some fear involved. And like, yeah, we should be aware of what's out there. But I never want to like scare parents into doing what we tell them to do.
right.
I'm hopeful that that's not the way we come across, because I don't think being fear based is healthy. So that aside, but what are some positive things people have said? I think it's always the um, success stories that parents share when they come back, 10 years later, because this work has been around a long time. We have the fruit of seeing parents say, now my daughter's in high school, and the conversations we're able to have is so wonderful. And I credit to the way that we were so open for 10 years before, she got here. And then, of course, the stories of protection, I think, are really powerful. And this is where it does get heavy, but with abuse, sexual abuse, and pornography exposure, I mean, those are really heavy, dark topics.
Yeah,
Um, so the stories we get from parents from protection, those are really powerful for us.
yeah. Well, knowledge is power. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's a part of this positive message is that you're, it's a positive resource to prevent these negative
Mhm.
things.
And
So,
many parents try to protect their children by giving them no information. They really do. And they sincerely think, I don't really want my children to have any information about sexuality. I don't want them to be thinking about it or know about it. And so they try to protect their children from any sexual messages. And they are equating ignorance with innocence.
Mhm.
They think if my child knows nothing, they're innocent. But actually, that innocent child who has no information is vulnerable, and they're now wide open to anything the world might tell them. But if their information is good information and it's coming from parents who really love them, then that information is power. And that information is protection. The protection that parents are looking for their children is found in the conversations they've had with their parents. So, starting to be the expert at an early age is the way to go. That's what I think parents come back and tell us is if I hadn't started these conversations, I don't know, what would have happened because they tell us what happens.
Mhm.
My child was able to come and tell me, or we were able to have a conversation about that. So we're learning, or we've learned all these years that the most powerful conversations you have are with you and your children once you start sharing with.
If there's one thing that parents could take away from this conversation today, what would you say that is?
I would say start early and keep talking.
I totally
I
agree. I think that would be the takeaway today is just start. Whether you have a baby or a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old, just look for opportunities and start talking and move towards your kids with this information and let them know that you are a safe place. So start talking, keep talking.
And on the backside of that, when I said start early and keep talking, that's ideal, or that's what, that would be nice. But some people are listening and are frustrated thinking, oh, I didn't start when they were on the changing table. I didn't use the vocabulary. I have so much catching up to do. Do not lose heart because they're still in your home. They still live with you. Just start somewhere. Start somewhere in the action. And then own it a little bit. Just say, this topic probably should have been brought up sooner in our family, but for some reason I kept thinking I would bring it up and I didn't, and you didn't. So here we are. We're a little bit stuck, but we're not going to stay stuck. We're going to start talking about some things, and we'll start with birth. I never really fully explained birth to you because birth gives you the chance to tell a happy story,
Yeah.
usually, and with lots of good vocabulary words. So
I love that idea. And if you're not sure where to start and you live over here on the North Shore area or you want to travel to Louisiana, we are going to have Mary Flo come and speak on May 6th in the evening, and we'll have more details to share. But will you please tell us what people can expect from this presentation and what kind of things they can take away from it?
well, first of all, thank you for inviting us. I'm so excited to get to come and to come to Covington. I just know it's a special place. I love Louisiana. Um, what we'll do is we'll take you from preschool to preteen, and we'll walk you through really some of the even steps before that, steps you can take as a parent to prepare the family message you want your children to have. We'll go through the vocabulary and protection of your children when they're young. We'll talk about the birth, the reproduction in all living things through seeds and eggs. We'll talk about screen safety. We'll talk about conception. How did that baby get in there? And then a lot of good cues for continuing the conversation. Now that we've got the foundational information down, where do we continue the conversation? Maybe with periods or thinking about their future, or once they know sort of the basic biology, how do we continue the conversation for what this will mean as a powerful part of their life going forward? So we start out with little children, but we continue the conversation. So we pack it all in.
And
And I
who
might
would,
add,
oh,
I
please.
think you're going to have fun.
Yeah. Oh,
I think
Oh,
anytime there's
good.
a live conversation, anytime there's a live event, like you're sitting here thinking, well, okay, I want to go because I want this information. And Mary Flo's going to talk about birth and bodies and babies and birth, all these fun things, pornography, periods, like, but I promise it's so much more fun than you think. And
oh,
you're
yeah.
going
We laugh a lot.
you laugh a lot, you learn so much more, and you just leave. We always say our favorite part of a live program, because we get to be part of it, is we see parents come in so nervous and intimidated, and then we see parents leave like high-fiving each other and like so fired up, like, we can do this. So come here, Mary Flo and May, if you are thinking about it, go, because it really is more fun than it sounds.
Yeah, it's a blast. Yeah.
And then is there a certain age that a certain age of kids that parents would really benefit the most from? I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. What ages would your kids be for you to benefit the most from this presentation?
We kind of target 10 and under, preschool to preteen.
Okay.
That we feel like is of the most benefit, but honestly, you can come with any age child if you'll pick up some pointers, but I think it mostly benefits parents preschool to preteen.
Awesome. And I did mention that we like to promote a lot of positivity here. And I'm so glad that you said this presentation is really going to bring that and that people are going to leave feeling motivated and inspired to have more of these conversations because that's exactly what we like to promote here on this podcast. So I really appreciate having both of you. We look forward to May 6th and thank you to all of our listeners. Don't forget that so much of the joy you experience in life is often the joy you choose to see. And go soak up all those little moments and show up as the hot mama you truly are. We'll see you next time.